This film, taken in 1956, was filmed by Alan Guthrie, hence the name at the beginning. He was the head of photography at the National Physical Laboratory where my father was working. It sort of takes the idea of a newly arriving music camper. In fact, Judith Kelgren, her mother was Ruth Rushton before marriage, and this is at Bottomstead, of course, and there she is arriving and wondering what she'd let herself in for. There is the Phoenix, which is now at Piggott's, marking the rebuilding of this particular. This goes back now to where we lived in Hampstead, Eldon Grove, and shows some scenes of circulars being prepared, and my mother on the telephone, and an envelope addressing party. We lived at number 6. I'm pouring the tea. My mother has just come in. Susan Baker, later Beelby Wright, is on the right. And that, I think, is Pat Banks drinking her tea. Some distinguished people were invited to camp, as you can see. I think that was a joke. This is packing up my father's old Humber. That's my father with the drum, which is still in use at Piggott's. My father's cars had to be able to take double basses and timps, and this was a useful vehicle, though not economical on petrol. The turning off to Bottomstead and the road coming up to the Bottomstead buildings, which we had for from about 1933 till 34 till we came to Piggott's in more than 30 years later. My father unlocking. Gerald Moss on the right there. Sadly, tents didn't go up quite as easily as this. These were 8-man army tents, of which we had a number, and putting them up was a huge chore at the beginning of camp. The vanguard had to do all of that, and of course things like these frames which had to be taken off windows The tin plates we used then had to be cleaned after their year of non-use. We had some help on these occasions from ladies from the neighbouring cottages to help with the washing up, and it was important that they appeared in that. That's me at the far end, and Elizabeth Ritchie, I think it is, at this end. Fritz Hiller, there filmed, was the timpanist and librarian for camp for years and years. Delightful man. You may recognise some of these pieces of furniture. A bread delivery. Mary Higgs. The piano was hired from Newbury. On the right there is Harriet Cundall, and this is the making of name tags, as you can see, being done there, and Rosemary is the other helper. Edric Cundall, again arriving in a heavily loaded car. Kate Freeman, I think that is, nearest to us there. Cellist for many years. The buildings there were those, the ones nearest to us there, were built by working parties in the 40s. Hampstead Norris, the little village, had trains in those days, and many people travelled on them. My father drifting towards the camera to welcome people. There is John Arriger and a variety of other good friends. Rosamond Jenkinson just walking out of the camera shot. And available cars being loaded up with people and gear to be driven the mile and a bit up to the Bottomstead site. Arrival was quite an operation. Not everybody got on the first vehicles. Again, the filling of the palliasses with straw to sleep on. Marjorie Rushton at the back there. Food was provided in the old malt house, and as you can see it was fairly squashed The benches were the ones that we still use. William Rushton on the left there, John Grove on the right. Two bassoonists. Washing up, the chap with the white jacket is Peter Gent, Martin Gent's father. And you can see the racks that are still in use. One of the smaller tents. My father checking on time and smoking a cigarette. And he is giving instructions to Gerald Moss, who was always the star orderly officer, and in fact the originator of the instructions for the orderly team. The orderly officer's round of duty was outlined in this early document. At that time, music camp was run an hour ahead of the rest of the world, very largely so that our next door neighbour could get to sleep. It was, after all, harvest time, and he was working very hard, and for the music to finish at 12 o'clock for him would have been late. 11 o'clock was quite late enough, so we just moved one forward. This is again Judith Kelgrin in a rather lit up tent. Gerald Moss waking up in the morning as orderly officer. And waking the members of his team, if I remember right. That, I think, is William Rushton being woken. Each orderly team had to have a sizable car and a car driver in it, and one of the duties was to go and collect the milk. Oliver Atkin is just unloading there, and I think it may be Jenny Lee on the right. The farm was perhaps half a mile away. This was the hot water supply being taken to the tents, and here we have Rivali. On the extreme right hand side is Richard Seal, subsequently organist at Salisbury, and still a regular singer at reunions. the wash tent again. Colin Davis. Judy Matthews, who is the head cook, talking to Gerald Moss about organisation, and preparation of food carried out then as now largely by an orderly team. The kitchen was small. Gillian Rushton putting in the food. Potatoes were always cooked in buckets. Christopher playing the call for lunch, and everybody leaving the tarpaulin area just outside camp to go in for a meal. Sitting on the left is Marjorie Rushton with her son Julian, I think. There's Frank Winton climbing along the seat. The orderly teams worked quickly, as you can see. And clearing up took almost no time at all. William Rushton and Tricia Marshall. Here again, I think the bullnose Morris that belonged to the Rushtons. Cars were very characterful in those days. The orderly officer was given first chance to have a shower at the end of his duty, and the orderly team clearly they were making quite sure that it was going to be Gerald who got there. I think that's Delia Fuchs, who's just come into the rehearsal. That's Colin Davis conducting. all sorts of people about. Fritz Spiegel playing there. David Gibbs playing the guitar. Again in white, Peter Gent at the right. There. There's Fritz, who had a cubbyhole for being librarian. That's Fritz Hiller. That's Fritz Spiegel. This chap was involved in sharpening the camp knives. I think that is one of the lock babies, but I'm not sure. That may be Mary Smith on the right. Cricket was played on the field. Actually with bothering to run runs, which was interesting. And table tennis, as you can see, was quite busy. This was one of the rooms that had been built. The billiard table was dominated by Frank Butterworth, and yes, now this is the invitation to go for a walk. Going for a walk was an important part of social life at music camp at that time. And some of you will know of White's law, which was that the number of people absent from after cocoa music was divisible by 2. A magical group, I think. There's John Arrigo again at the back. Christopher Monk and Edric Cundall. I'm not sure if this is a sectional rehearsal or now that's me playing chess against Dennis Young. There's Arthur Campbell and Michael Herzig, and in between them Geoffrey Hartley. And I think this is Coco. That is the same rack for mugs that we use. There's Edric Cundall conducting. You can see the barn was very, very much smaller than the one we now enjoy. And Colin Davis again. I think that's Fritz. And my father. something's gone wrong, which he finds amusing. This was a celebration cake produced for after cocoa with lots and lots of candles on it. And that is William Rushton saying a few words. At this time, alcohol wasn't allowed in music camp, so people occasionally would rush off to the local pub, which was in Hampstead Norris, and partake of the local ales. They were in a hurry. This chap who's just having a drink is the photographer, Alan. After cocoa, the quintet with my father leading, I think. This is Helena Candle drawing. There's John Arriger again in the gallery. Roger Norrington on the left, and Rick Seal accompanying him. I forget who the other singer is. Want to know him. Lots of applause. At midnight, camp went to bed and lights were turned out, as I said, partly for the benefit of our neighbour and partly because my father decided it that way. You see him here walking around with a torch, sending people off to bed. And switching the lights on. Peter Gent again, next to Maurice Hancock, a distinguished music camper. Orchestra and chorus. John Noble, Colin Davis singing a solo, Helena Candle drawing. Phyllis Roast, Dick Gandy, the great tenor of the time. At the end of camp, the clocks had to go back to world time. Trains were looked up. My father's old Humber puts good use again, even if the boot wasn't entirely shut. Getting this one started was something of a problem. Incineration of camp rubbish. Dennis Young again with Peter Gent. Tents taken down with remarkable ease. Folding of the wash tents. Alan Pollard dancing. This was the chorus room, again built by us, into which the now reasonably dry tents were stored. Bottomstead wasn't really used from the end of one second camp until the beginning of the next first camp, and shutting up was a very sad process. The piano was returned to Newbury. Hickey still functions, I think. Found property was sorted through. The music came at that time on loan from the BBC generally, and those two wicker baskets took it back. Now this is the rear guard having a meal. Rear guard took about 2 days, I suppose, of fairly serious work. This is me turning off the water, if I remember right. And emptying the pipes against any freezing. That shed was where the Wheeler Robinsons used to sleep in this field. There's the Phoenix again. It had copper flames around it originally.